Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Calibration Point podcast. I'm super excited to have a return visitor with us, Bill Stanczykiewicz he is the director of the fundraising school at the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, among many other things, and just has an accomplished background and pedigree that we could talk about for probably an hour or so. Bill, you bring just a wealth of perspective. And what I loved about just getting to ask you to come on today, what topic do you think that is burning right now? And immediately you're like stewardship. And that really struck a chord with me because, stewardship's where we decide what's going to happen in the future. And so often we look at trailing edge indicators to make decisions in fundraising, and the leading edge indicator is stewardship. And so often, I think kind of maybe a way to set you up, what I experience is so often organizations think they know stewardship, but they really don't. And, Bill, I just want to just kind of riff with you on this. Like, tell the audience, what does stewardship mean to you? What do you see? Why is this such a big deal? How do we end up in the field in this place where, we think we understand stewardship and it just becomes kind of an autonomous approach to the relationship? What are you seeing right now in stewardship?
Yeah, Jamie, what I'm seeing are donors who are saying they don't have relationships with fundraisers beyond when the fundraiser is always asking for the next gift. And stewardship, and you know this so well as you teach your graduate students at Indiana University, and for us at the fundraising school, that fundraising is a 14-step process. Making the ask doesn't happen until step 13. Stewardship of the donor is step 14, but stewardship is also part of the 12 steps leading up to making the ask. And broadly understood, stewardship is being in relationship with our prospective donors and with our donors in ways that don't involve asking them for financial gift. And again, too many donors are saying that they meet a fundraiser once and are already being asked for the gift, and then they don't hear from the fundraiser again for 2 or 3 years, or during the meeting, the fundraiser isn't asking them anything about them. It's just about the nonprofit and how the donor can help their nonprofit. It's a very one-sided conversation. And so that's why, we just have this growing interest in wanting to make sure that fundraisers are properly utilizing stewardship in their fundraising planning, when they're making the request, and in staying in relationship with their donors afterwards.
So let's kind of put that maybe into context. And then I've got a bigger looming question I want to pick your brain on and your expertise. So what does to you, as someone who is a stewarder, but also as a donor who stewarded, your wife's a major gifts officer. You see this in so many different places. Can you define, and let me back up. I heard it quoted once, and I can't remember. It might have been Henry Nouwen, but I can't remember. Somebody said that good stewardship is the year-long celebration of the donor, or the continual year-long celebration of the donor. What does good stewardship mean to you? Let's start there, and then I want to get your perspective on a bigger question.
Well, somebody quotes Henry Nouwen. I certainly don't want to be the guy who goes next. So that's quite the standard to try to join alongside. Stewardship starts when we're first learning about the prospective donor in terms of how we go about gathering that information and doing so appropriately. Both in formal ways, which could be, just online, what we see about them out in the public square, and informal ways, talking to people who know them. And so just be gathering that information with great care. We're not being nosy. We're not being inappropriate. We're not getting involved with gossip. We're stewarding that new relationship with great care, with great intentionality. And then when we're meeting with the donor, all of us who are fully able have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth, and we should be observing and listening 80% of the time, talking only 20% of the time. And when we talk, especially early in the relationship, asking those open-ended questions. tell me about yourself. Tell me about your work. Tell me about your family. Tell me about your hobbies. And then let's talk about your philanthropic passions and how those fit in to these other things that we're talking about. And then how those perhaps could align with our nonprofit organization, and continuing subsequent meetings like that. I had an example in my own fundraising, in the meeting with a gentleman named Don, yes, his real name. And I was asking him about his family and his work and his hobbies. And he stopped me and he said, Bill, you're the only fundraiser who ever meets with me who asks me a lot of questions about me before you start talking about your nonprofit or the potential for my next gift. I've carried that in my heart in a heavy way ever since, because I'm like, wow, people are just viewing this gentleman as a walking wallet, as an ATM machine, as opposed to a real person with dignity whose values are being expressed, who's enjoying fulfillment by participating in our nonprofit organization. And then lastly, after the gift is made, staying in touch with our donors in ways that don't always involve asking them for more money. And that could involve just an email. Somebody is a IU basketball fan. Hey, did you see that Arizona game the other night? And how they really battled back. And boy, it'll be great when the full team is healthy. Or, the holidays are coming up, or you see something in the news that could affect their business. Certainly inviting them to our events, making sure we're following each other on social media. When appropriate and able, having those one-on-one meetings. And in all those communications, not always asking for the next gift, because what a donor will internalize is, all you care about is my money, not about me. And that's what happens when we don't have proper stewardship.
A couple questions to that. You hit on some really key points. Here is a response I'll often hear in the field. It's the development officer who believes that, they only have limited time. So I can't go in and spend much time talking about them because they know I've got 30 minutes. And then they end up, what I see, and I'm just curious how you combat this. What I end up seeing is they turn their 30 minutes into tactical functional communication instead of building equity in the relationship. And then they wonder why the giving ends up where it is. How do you coach someone? How do you teach someone to be able to change that tape in their head, that because, Bill says, Jamie, you got 30 minutes and I got 30 minutes with you, to keep me from going to that, okay, I got to get right to my business approach and present my case to Bill, as opposed to seeing Bill as a person and building a relationship with you?
Yeah, a couple things, Jamie. Great question. One is that this is the art of fundraising, and we're going to learn that different donors have different personality and communication styles. And we teach this in our major gifts course. We use the DISC assessment. There are others that people can utilize. And some folks, so if you're fundraising for my wife, Carmen, she's going to love chatting for an hour and a half about family, about the affairs of the day. How's everybody doing? Who's doing what for the holidays? And you would know that about Carmen, and you would know it's not going to be a half-hour meeting. If you fundraise for me, I have earned the nickname Bullet Point Bill. I'm fine with just, a 30-minute meeting. And what's true about people who are wired more like me when I'm on the donor side is then I don't need a super long business case. You can even give me the bullet points on the business case leading up to the ask. And so you can still build in time for, Bill, how are you? How's your family? How's work going? What are the holiday plans? And it's just going to be a much more concise conversation. But it's part of the art of fundraising. It's not one size fits all. We tailor those meetings and eventually the requests and eventually the stewardship follow-up based on each and every donor's different type of personality and communication style. That's why we have a class at the fundraising school called The Art of Fundraising. And it is about nothing but that empathy, emotional intelligence, knowing how to relate to donors in that intangible way, which is so important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And then the follow-up question, kind of to take it to the next level, how do you see board members engaging with that?
Not enough. The data show that fewer than half of nonprofits have 100% board giving, or CEOs who say their boards are fully engaged. And this has been my area of research specialty, is how do we get board members more engaged? And one huge way to do that is stewardship. If you have if you have board members who are hesitant to fundraise, first of all, they probably have misconceptions about fundraising. They probably think they just need to either go up to random people and just start asking them for money, or they immediately have to go to their friends, closest coworkers, and family members and just start asking them for money. They don't understand all the planning and preparation that goes into cultivating and building those relationships. All of that said, a very practical thing we can do is involve our board members in stewardship, that during board meetings, we're going to take time in the middle of the meeting and ask board members to do a handwritten note to 5 different donors. And we can give them even the template to write from, either verbatim or to adapt from based on each donor. We can have them send emails to 25 donors. And again, give them a template to either cut and paste or to modify for each of the 25. We can have our board members call some of our donors. They're likely going to leave voicemail most of the time. But, when I bring this up, when I teach for the fundraising school, Jamie, we ask, does anybody do this? And the ones who raise their hand say, so what happens when the board members do this? I've heard the story multiple times where the board member calls and says, I was making the phone calls and I left mostly voicemail, but the donors who picked up and I talked to, they went on and on about why they were passionate about our nonprofit, about our cause. And then when the call ended, they were shocked I didn't ask them for more money. And the board member's like, this fundraising thing, we should do this more often. This is a good thing. And the staff's just kind of like, okay, fundraising. Yeah, okay, good idea. Thanks for suggesting that. So the stewardship is a way to put the toe in the water, help demystify fundraising as we're encouraging our board members to be donors at their highest level of generosity. My research shows we should not have a board minimum, and especially for diversity, equity, and inclusion reasons. The moment you put a dollar amount, everybody below that dollar amount, by definition, can't be on your board. And you're leaving people out by economic class, by background, by all sorts of different characteristics. And some people think, well, wait a minute. The more prosperous board members, you're letting them off the hook. They're just going to donate $5. Oh, no. We've got fundraisers trained by Jamie Levy and Associates. We have fundraisers trained at the fundraising school. They will meet you at your highest level generosity, board member. Don't you worry about that. But minimums are exclusionary. And minimum also sounds like, again, like this is expected as opposed to this is something you want to do because you're passionate about our nonprofit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, as we know, and you mentioned earlier, just looking at the bigger cycle of development, if we don't steward well, then we automatically limit the relationship, and people, to your point you just made, aren't going to give well because they're not finding their place of passion.
And with our board members too, we're going to ask them to ask others. And you talk about stewardship. How can I ask anybody else to donate if I'm not a donor myself? And so that fits within this paradigm of stewardship as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as we go into next year, I think, from just everything, when you think of stewardship, no matter what the economy does, no matter what donor preferences do, stewardship is the key that unlocks relationships, to your point. And if we're not stewarding, then it doesn't matter where the donor is. They're not going to be at a place that they want to give or sacrifice to give to be a part of something bigger than themselves.
The economy is always an important equation, as you know. There is this wealth effect of giving. When people have more money, they spend more money. When people have more money, they can donate more money. So we're always watching the economy. And there are these questions, we're either in a recession or we're close to a recession. People are concerned about that. People are asking about the inflation rate. That's hitting nonprofits hard. They have to do some belt tightening at the same time. Our school's review of inflation, research into inflation, shows that when the inflation rate is higher than 5%, that can have a dampening effect on charitable giving. And as we record this, the inflation rate is around 7.5%, depending on what measure that you utilize. But then there's this other issue that's out there, and I know you've spoken about this on some of your other podcasts, is still the significant amount of dollars that are in U.S. savings accounts, that the savings rate is much higher than otherwise would have been on historical averages, based on all the money people either were receiving during the pandemic or weren't spending during the pandemic. And the folks most likely to still have that pandemic associated savings are in the income classes that are most likely to be donors. So again, and by the way, a review of the research from my colleague, Dr. Patrick Rooney, shows that the longer the dollars are in savings, the donor very likely, and every donor is different, but the donor more likely is to say, that's not income anymore that I need to hang on to for the mortgage payment, the health bill, in case I lose my job, something horrible happens. It now starts to become viewed as wealth. And when viewed as wealth, the possibility of that becoming a charitable donation can increase. Now, these wealth effects are important, but the number one indicator on whether people are going to donate or to continue donate to your nonprofit is your relationship with that donor and their trust in you. Donors want stability. Fundraising happens at the speed of trust. And the way to demonstrate that stability and foster and grow that trust is through a strong approach to stewardship.
Stewardship. Wow. I think that is the perfect way to end on. And, it goes back to what we said. You think you know stewardship. And I think a lot of people know autopilot on stewardship, but they don't understand the dynamics that you're talking about.
And Jamie, too many donors who have spoken at our school who've said, again, I make the gift and I don't hear from the fundraiser for another 2 or 3 years. And when I do, it's just to ask for another gift. There's just a human dignity problem with that approach. And we understand fundraisers need to get to the next donor and make the next request, but we really need to have that both and mentality of staying in touch with our donors in ways that don't always involve asking them for the next gift.
Yeah, excellent, Bill. So appreciate you as always. Very helpful and insightful. And coming into just as we are thinking about relationships and how people give. I mean, stewardship it's the magic sauce, and maybe it's not so magic. To your point, it's the art. We just have to do it.
And Jamie, I'm grateful for your work as you're teaching fundraising and nonprofit leadership and teaching that in an ethical manner. Our sector is stronger because of that. So thank you for your leadership and your great work.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.